A few weeks ago, I was waiting at the Fingston stoplight on Lake Hook when I heard a honk. I was sure that I'd done something wrong. It's not unheard of. I'm a very nervous driver. But I looked at the light, and it was still red, and I checked my brights, and they were off. Then I looked to my left, and I saw a congregant in their car. We rolled down our windows and said hello. The light changed, and we continued driving east. Now, driving parallel to each other, we found ourselves in a little bit of a funny situation because we were driving at the same speed, so we kept getting stopped at the same lights. And if you know Lake Hook, which you all do, there are a lot of lights, and we just kept getting stopped, and it got to the point where I was so aware that I might have been being watched that I just called a friend so that I could distract myself until we eventually got onto the highway and went our own ways. It would be a silly story of a rabbi and a congregant in the wild if that was the extent of the interaction. But what had happened at the stoplight was far more meaningful. This congregant had lost her mother just a few days earlier, and the last time that I'd seen her was in the sea of mourners at her mom's funeral. So by honking, she gave me the chance to offer her condolences in person, and she could graciously thank me for being at the service. It was a profound moment of connection, and I'm so glad that she honked at me. It woke me up from just going through the motions of my day, and it called me to look up and see the world with greater clarity. I don't usually get a honk, though, and so I spend a lot of my life looking down, and I imagine many of us do as well. Much of the time, I mean this literally, we are always looking at our phones, our devices. Sorry, Cantor. And sometimes it's more figurative. We can get so consumed by our own concerns that we retreat into our personal universes. Our eyes are cast downward on these little 2 feet radii of our existences. For me, this is most acute when I'm in a rush or I'm feeling really stressed. There have been times here where I'm hurrying to grab materials for services, and I'll fully scamper past a congregant, not even saying hi. Or when I'm desperately trying to finish a sermon at night at home, and I don't get up from my computer when Jacob gets home. It's not one of my better qualities. I have so much bouncing around in my head, anxieties and running to-do lists and concerns, that I often forget to look up and connect with who's in front of me. In my fixation on myself, I can lose sight of all those around me. On Rosh Hashanah, when I presented you all with the 3-pronged noticing, naming, knowing approach to belonging, I didn't acknowledge that noticing is really hard. That was a different sermon. But today, I'm going to tell you that it is. In 2023, there are so many things competing for our attention that focusing on each other is harder than ever, and it's a practice that we need to cultivate. The ubiquity of screens and devices means we're never that far from another distracting notification. In his book, The Attention Merchants, author Tim Wu explains that ours is a time afflicted by a widespread sense of attentional crisis, one captured by the phrase Homo distractus, a species of ever shorter attention span known for compulsively checking their devices. It's not only external factors that keep us from looking up and seeing each other. We're all unbelievably stressed out, and when it's hard enough to attend to our own needs, it makes sense that looking out beyond our own immediate ecosystem would fall by the wayside. But what do we lose out on when we're not looking up and not paying attention to those around us? We miss opportunities to connect and learn, to recognize growth and celebrate success, to help someone who's struggling. And not seeing each other can be dangerous. Paying attention to the fullness of another person's life experience allows us to cultivate empathy and understanding and generosity, but focusing on our own microcosm shrinks these capacities. we can become selfish and judgmental, sure that our reality is the one that's most true or most important. Yom Kippur is a time for teshuvah, for returning to our most essential values and to the people that we are capable of being. The shofar is like the honk of the car on Lake Cook, calling us to pay attention, waking us up to the ways that we've walked through the world too often with our eyes cast down. Distraction, self-centeredness, inattentiveness. For all these things, I am sorry. And so, as we head into this day of introspection, I want to share a Torah teaching with you that has transformed me over the past few years. It has helped me to cultivate attentiveness, even when I'm at my most distracted. Maybe it will transform you in some way too. There's a sentence formula used at significant inflection points in the biblical text. Vayisa einav vayar. So-and-so lifted their eyes and saw. The Hebrew words here are significant. It's not just this person saw something. The individual had to yisa, lift, their eyes, einayim, in order to see. There's intentionality here. Lifting your eyes indicates an active effort to look beyond your normal range of vision. Hi, choir. I haven't been looking at you. I'm sorry. To look beyond yourself. And the sight that follows, vayar, is profound and symbolic. In the Torah, seeing isn't just physical. It means understanding another on a deep level. And then, when the biblical characters lift their eyes, something extraordinary always happens. Looking up engenders love and compassion. It allows the characters to resolve conflict and see new perspectives, and it moves them beyond their judgments of others. So tonight I want to share a couple of these Torah moments with you to share what it means to actively pay attention, to seek to see and understand the world outside of ourselves. One of the most famous acts of compassion in the Torah occurs when Abraham looks up and sees three men standing near him. Vayisa einav vayar, vehine shlosha anashim nitzavim alav. Now, Abraham had a lot going on in this moment. He was an old man in a new place in the midst of this kooky Lech Lecha journey that God had sent him on, and he had just endured a late-in-life circumcision. So he was busy. And yet, he was attuned enough to his surroundings to notice these strangers and leap into host mode, bringing them food and water, offering to wash their feet, insisting that they stay and rest. His generosity in this moment becomes the blueprint for the Jewish value of hachnasat orchim, welcoming guests. And it all happened because Abraham looked up and saw people in need. When we look up and beyond ourselves, we become aware of those of us who are wandering. Like Abraham, expanding our aperture allows us to pay attention to the vulnerable among us and to care for them. As Mark mentioned, our BJBE community right now is supporting a Ukrainian refugee family in Glencoe. And I recently received an email from one of our volunteers urging additional support for a much-needed meal train. This volunteer wrote, "I have gotten to know Olga, and she is an amazing single mother caring for her children. She's taking her daughter to Luri nearly every day for cancer treatment. Whether it's a delivered meal or personally stopping in to say hello, I'm sure she would be so happy to meet you." In this email, Olga wasn't just a recipient of charity. She was a full, dynamic person, and seeing her humanity pushed this volunteer to act with generosity. And then by sharing Olga's story, she was able to mobilize others as well. A few chapters after Abraham's hospitality, we meet Rebecca, traveling to meet her future husband, Isaac. She too had plenty to be preoccupied with. She was leaving her home and all she'd ever known to go marry a stranger. But the text reads, "Vatisa Rivka et eineha, vatere et Yitzchak." Rebecca lifted her eyes and she saw Isaac. And Isaac, waiting to greet his betrothed, also, "Vayisa einav vayar." He lifted his eyes, and he saw her. What ensues is a blossoming love between Isaac and Rebekah, the first instance of romantic love in the whole Torah. Their mutual seeing, tisa einecha, yisa einav, Hebrew is gendered, it's a prerequisite for their connection. They were willing to see each other and pay attention to someone outside of themselves. And lifting their eyes, Rebekah and Isaac looked up from their individual existences, and they let the other in. Actively looking for and at each other invites connection, and it lays the foundation for a closer relationship. Whether that's between friends, colleagues, neighbors, or spouses, paying attention to the person before us is essential. As Rabbi Sherman mentioned on Rosh Hashanah, questions like, "How are you?" could easily be dismissed as pleasantry, but if we look up and engage and really pay attention to the person in front of us, we get closer to seeing each other as our full selves. Now, lifting our eyes isn't just important for nice things like love and compassion and care. It can also help us repair what is broken. Jacob and Esau were brothers who had been estranged for 20 years. Jacob had stolen Esau's inheritance. Esau threatened to kill him. Jacob fled. And then, several chapters later, they reunited. The first thing that they did wasn't attack each other, but looked up to see each other. Vayisa Yaakov einav, vayar v'hine Esav ba v'imo 400 ish. Jacob lifted his eyes and saw Esau coming with 400 men. And Esau, it's a little, they could have fought, but they didn't. And Esau, vayisa et einav vayar et hanashim ve'et hayeladim. He lifted his eyes and he saw the women and children, Jacob's wives and kids. Instead of rushing to attack each other, the two brothers paused. They looked up from their grudges, and after taking in the fullness of the person in front of them, they embraced and they moved on. Jacob could see that despite stealing his brother's blessing, Esau still amassed the power and wealth that was so important to him. And Esau can see that Jacob is more than a trickster. He's a father and a husband too. So often, painful conflict narrows our vision to the point where we can only focus on our own hurt and anger. Sometimes this is justified and necessary because in unhealthy relationships, it protects us from further harm. But when we do seek reconciliation, we have to be able to look up and see beyond ourselves. We need to look up from our individual grievances and remember that the person in front of us is a complex and nuanced being. If we can work to see things from their perspective, then maybe, like Jacob and Esau, we can move from disdain to embrace. How many of our most devastating estrangements might be mended or at least softened if we could raise our eyes to see the other with open-eyed honesty? When we make an effort to see and know each other, we can better understand our differences and connect to our shared humanity. In the book of Numbers, the evil prophet Balaam is commissioned to curse the Israelites, but Vayisa Bil'am et einav, vayar et Yisrael shochen lishvatav. Balaam lifted his eyes and saw Israel settled, tribe by tribe. Because he lifted his eyes and saw a beautiful community assembled before him, Balaam was moved to change course. He blesses them instead with words of Matovu. How good are your tents, Jacob, your sanctuaries, Israel. The act of lifting his eyes allowed for Balaam to move beyond his negative preconceptions and made space for the truth of who these people were. It's so easy and so human to put people in boxes. If we learn what kind of car someone drives, or their favorite news channel, or where they went to college, we can make assumptions about their class, or their politics, or their intelligence. None of these assumptions get us any closer to really knowing the individual, though. And in generating those narratives, we actually are more likely to create division and distance between each other and polarization within our community. Our perceptions about others impact the way we treat them, And so not seeing someone's authentic self can be marginalizing and can cause so much pain. But the opposite can be true too. When we really see each other, those judgments melt away, and we can celebrate, embrace, and support our individuality. Now, this can extend beyond just being less judgmental. Seeing others fully can lead to structural change as well. Before same-sex marriage was legalized, polls demonstrated that those who knew gay people were significantly more supportive of same-sex marriage than those who didn't have those relationships. When we can see the fullness of another person, not just their sexual orientation or any other one-dimensional identity marker, their needs become real to us. And when we see others more fully, we can take that into the public square. Voting patterns and then legislative priorities can change, and we get that much closer to creating a more just world where everyone's full humanity is valued. Throughout our biblical text, the lifting of the eyes is this essential intervention, one that calls our characters to pay attention. It brings them to a place that is more loving and generous and understanding than before. And it's been an essential intervention for me too. When I notice myself scampering, caught up in my own world, I hear Vaisa Einav in my head. It tells me, lift your eyes, Lily. See and pay attention to the people around you. The modern Hebrew phrase for paying attention to something is lasim lev, to place your heart. In this idiomatic usage, the language is telling us that paying attention means sending your heart somewhere. It teaches us that when we pay attention, we don't keep our heart to ourselves. We allow it to open up, to take in the people around us. Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset said, "Tell me to what you pay attention, and I will tell you who you are." In 5784, who will we be? Who and what will we pay attention to? May this new year be one in which we lift our eyes and open our hearts. May we see each other in our fullness and pay attention to each other. And may that sight and heart-filled attentiveness push us to be the caring, compassionate, empathetic people that we are all capable of becoming. K'mar Chatima Tova, may we all be sealed for good.
back in our Machzorim to page 160.